one of the hardest hit areas in Northeast Tennessee was Carter County, and one of those who has been working hard and leading a team to try to respond to the needs as they arise is Todd Hallman. He's the senior pastor at First Baptist Church in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Todd, as we're 2 weeks out, what are the most urgent needs now? And as you see it, maybe going into week three.
I think that the greatest need is a sense of urgency that for the city or Elizabethton City, um, life is pretty much back to normal for the most part. But just yesterday, I learned that right across the state line, there are search and rescue that are looking for bodies of people who are still missing. Whereas our response is obviously to give food and donations and those kind of things. But there's still many in our area and within 45 minutes of here, an hour from here, that still they've not been found. And so it's a much different story as you go in the northern parts of the county across the state line.
Mm. You, you know, that's the challenging part of this is this was a disaster that impacted so many areas, and as we had kind of are gradually getting back online, it's easy to forget that not far from where you sit at the moment that you're watching this video, there is a tremendous amount of devastation that's still going on. So when you say urgency, do you mean like an urgency? We're still in emergency mode. Is that what I hear you saying?
Right. And I don't think this is a long, I have to remind our people it's a long-term response. Normal is a setting on a dryer. There's going to be a new sense of normal that's cultivated, but we are a long way away. I mean, I learned yesterday, that there are some people that will not have running water or power for 3 to 6 months. And that's just mind boggling to a lot of us who had the inconvenience without power and water for 48 hours. In fact, there were people at the church today that they have no running water still, and they live in Burnsville. So, and that's not just say Western North Carolina, even the areas like Pogie, Elk Mill, and going up 321 towards Boone, those areas, those little hollers along the way, completely just devastated, unable to get there by car or by truck or having used ATVs. And that's been the response. And it's going to be like that for weeks on end.
You mentioned the church. You are senior pastor at First Baptist in Elizabethton, where people lost homes within city limits and or had a lot of damage in their homes within city limits. How did how did you go from being pastor at the church and leading a ministry in the community to being a part of the flood relief effort 2 weeks ago? What happened? How
So
did that happen?
the director of Parks and Rec is David Nanny, and he happens to be a church member here. Is actually one of our deacons. And I told him when he started with the distribution, I knew that they were going to be distributing and receiving trucks, that if he needed volunteers, let me know. And that's one way that I could get some of our people to volunteer. And so I went over there Sunday, I guess 2 weeks ago, and really, I don't expect anybody to kind of expect. There's no way to prepare for what's happened because who would ever think that a hurricane, tropical storm would affect this area in the mountains? I mean, people don't think of hurricanes with the mountains unless the mountains are on the coast. I mean, here we are, 5 hours, 5.5 hours inland, and we're as decimated as what the coast of regions were when it came ashore. And so very quickly, his phone's ringing off the hook. He is pulled in 1,000 directions. And so he asked me to help coordinate efforts with volunteers. And that kind of evolved into receiving goods and distributing goods. So logging major contributions of donated items, and then also logging major distributions. So if there were, if I should say there were bulk items that needed to go out, people picking up for more than one family, then those were logged. And that way we could keep track and make sure that the goods that were sent out were going to the people that so desperately needed them.
What's your response, or I guess what's been your reaction to the response from the community by way of volunteers and donations?
I'm I never cease to be amazed. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, community came together, and it did not matter. I mean, every creed, every nation, every ethnic group, didn't matter who you are, how wealthy you had been before the storm. A lot of people were just put in the same space. And when trauma, it does not know economic status or educational background. When trauma hits, you just respond. And so, to me, that is the greatest. I think that the greatest victory of this storm is that people have come together. There's really a sense of community, and it's no longer city or county people. We're in this together, and we're in it for the long haul. And if those of us who are further along the path, the object is not to finish the race alone. The object is to finish the race with others. And so, whatever we need to do to help other people cross that finish line of success and independence, that's our commitment.
Uh, Todd, you mentioned Katrina, and I recall you have more than a knowledge of what you heard on the news about Katrina. You were
I,
there.
I was there.
How did you experience Katrina before, during, and after?
So, before Katrina, I guess I learned about it on the Wednesday before it hit on Sunday.
You
And
lived there? Were you there living in
I
New
was.
Orleans?
We lived there. So I lived about 15 miles outside the city of New Orleans on the West Bank. And so there were levees that protected us on the West Bank. So I suffered no flooding, and actually my county parish suffered no flooding because we were on the West Bank and the levees protected us. But we evacuated on Saturday morning before the storm hit on Sunday and went to Mississippi. And I made the decision Saturday, early Sunday morning, that Jackson, Mississippi was not safe. And I mean, everybody was like, "Oh, this is too far inland." My previous experience was Hurricane Hugo in 1989, and I grew up in Charlotte, so I was a middle school student, and I saw what that storm did in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's again 4 hours inland. So I knew Jackson, Mississippi was not safe. So we moved to a safer place near West Monroe, Louisiana. And we stayed there through Tuesday, at which point I drove to my parents' house in Charlotte. And then we drove back into the city of New Orleans basically Sunday night, the Sunday before Labor Day of 2005. And we were there to receive our first 18 wheeler. My wife and I coordinated 18 wheelers of supplies to come to the church there in Louisiana. And it just kind of happened. And so suddenly we became the distribution for the county. And I think that we learned a lot of things, what to do and what not to do. And that's why this go around for our city and county people who really did not have the knowledge of know exactly what to do. I was able, I think, to hopefully assist them in making sure that this time we get this right. And I learned these mistakes of distribution and making sure the distribution, at least that arena of response, was a well-oiled machine, and with little to no hiccups. In the coming weeks and months, when the volunteers disappear, when there's, when people go back to their homes and they turn the page, we've got Thanksgiving we're approaching, we've got Christmas. And I think the major thing for those that are volunteering and distributing is, you don't want to relinquish all of your monies and all of your supplies at this point, because the needs are going to be 12, 18 months down the road. But I'm concerned about the hundreds of people whose there's no reason to give them a rake or shovel. There's nothing to rake, and there's nothing to shovel. There's nothing to collect because their homes have been washed away completely.
Got some of them. I mean, you've seen this. They literally lost the ground under their houses. Like
Exactly. And there's
they've
not going to
lost
be any
property.
space. Their property is going to be unlivable. You're not going to be sort of like oceanfront property when in hurricanes, they end up condemning those oceanfront properties, and you can't get them insured. And if you can't get them insured, you're not going to be able to get a loan unless you're a multimillionaire or have a lot of money, resources. They're not going to let you build there
So for the
again.
past 2 weeks, you've been a volunteer coordinator and a distribution manager. It sounds like for the relief effort in Carter County. You are inherently, though, a minister of the gospel, and that's your primary focus. Are what is what are you talking about in terms of that context of faith here? Is there something that you have learned, or is there a message that you feel you're being led to share in terms of the suffering, the grief, and also the why of it all. That for many people, life just destroyed, turned upside down. Is there something
Yeah,
from
I
the
think
place of being a minister that's causing you to share?
Yeah, I think that the greatest message we can put out is hope, that there is hope and that there's light at the end of the tunnel and that there are better days ahead. If our best days are behind us, we have no vision. And when we have no vision, we are destined to demise. So from my standpoint, it is to bring hope and encouragement to people and to help them know that there are better days ahead. Of course, as a church person, I obviously believe that our hope comes from one person, that's Jesus. But I think that that's what we need to capitalize on is this hope and continue to push hope. That there are better days ahead, and we need to focus on the goodness of what's going on. There are so many people trying to, I guess, play the blame game of this one or that one. Blame it does not fix people's issues. Politics does not fix people's issues, and we're in a political election cycle, and it's been so polarizing. And what I've seen in the last 2 weeks is exactly what we've always needed to be, and that is focused on what matters. And now, every creed and every tribe are coming together to work together for the needs of people, and that is encouraging. And I think that's really that's what we need to focus on more than anything else is bringing people and helping people know that there are better days ahead. Just to hang in there. The other thing is for those of us who've not been as affected by it, because I think all of us are affected in different ways. There's a tendency to think, well, thank you, Lord, for protecting me because my home didn't flood. But the message that sends to others is that God didn't protect other people. And I think that's a very dangerous kind of sentiment to put out there. I think that God is ultimately in control. Suffering is one of those things. It happens, it occurs, and it's how we respond to it. It's not, this is not, and I'll be very clear about this. This is not God's judgment on a community or a home or a person or a city or a certain section of the country. God doesn't do that. God is a good God, and so rather than focusing on the wrath of trying to ascribe wrath to God, and this explains us away. I think that we need to understand that storms happen, and what God wants His people to do is to come together, like what's happened, in a sense of community. And as a result of the church's leading and guiding and helping push people in the right direction, it's amazing the testimony that we give about the goodness of God. I don't think there has to be much preaching these days. We preach by what we do. Focus on the goodness of God and how you and I can be instruments of His peace, instruments of His grace, and to encourage people that have lost some things and maybe have lost everything, that there is hope, and we're here for the long haul to walk and stand with you.
Final question I have is a practical one. If you want to be involved in the ongoing recovery work in Carter County, where would you send people?
Yeah, I think there's two specific places currently, and these may change. It's the ever changing ebb and flow of distribution and help. But the first place, Carter County Schools, of course, I think closed Little Milligan. Little Milligan School, right there in the community, is a distribution center, and that will service people not only there in Hampton, but also in areas of Pogey and Elk Mill, also into Western North Carolina. And that would be a resource I would recommend people to go if they want to know, people's homes that they can go, or those areas to help with debris clean out, etc. I would go there and list their ideas about, because they're boots on the ground and they can help assist in that. And that would be on 321 towards Boone. The other area would be First Baptist Church of Rome Mountain. And of course, they will help people immediately in Rome Mountain area, all the way up to Newland and beyond. And then a third one, Josh, would be in, I think, Johnson County, would be First Christian Church of Mountain City. They also are a distribution point. And there's several others.
Todd Holman, thank you for your time. We appreciate your work and your wisdom around responding to emergencies. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.